The massive silver spacecraft landed smoothly on the purple landing pad of Nexus 7's Galactic Academy of Sciences. Professor X watched through the large observation window, his four eyes blinking in rapid succession. This was the first time human students would study at the Academy, and he felt both excited and nervous. The ship's door opened with a soft hiss. 20 human students walked out, carrying bags and looking around with sleepy eyes. It was 3 a.m. Earth time, and most of them had slept poorly during the journey. Professor X noticed 2 students in particular who could barely keep their eyes open. "Welcome to Nexus 7, Professor X announced through the Universal Translator. "I am Professor X, and I will be your main instructor during your stay here." The students bowed slightly, following Earth's Korean customs. One of the sleepy students he had noticed earlier stepped forward. "Thank you, Professor. I am Hejin, the group representative," he said, trying to hide a yawn behind his hand. Standing next to Hejin was his roommate from Earth, Tallman, who had actually fallen asleep standing up. An alien assistant gently poked him awake with one of her tentacles. "Oh, sorry," Tallman mumbled, bowing quickly. Professor X led the group through the Academy's gleaming corridors. The walls were made of a special material that changed color to help regulate everyone's mood. Right now, they glowed a soft blue to help keep the students calm during their first day. "Your rooms are in the East Wing," Professor X explained, pointing with 2 of his upper limbs. "We have adjusted them to Earth gravity and atmosphere. However, you must understand that Nexus 7 has frequent seismic activity. We have very strict safety protocols." The Jinn nodded seriously, then immediately yawned again. Professor X noticed that none of the students seemed concerned about the mention of seismic activity. On their home planet, Korea experienced earthquakes regularly, so this wasn't new to them. As they reached the dormitory area, Administrator Ven hurried toward them. Her crystal-like body sparkled under the Academy's lights. "Professor X, we need to discuss the safety protocols for our new guests," she said urgently. "The seismic readings for this month are unusual." "Of course, Administrator," Professor X replied. He turned to the students. "Please rest now. Classes begin tomorrow at local sunrise." Hajin and Talmin didn't need to be told twice. They found their room, dropped their bags, and fell onto their beds fully dressed. Within seconds, both were sound asleep. In the corridor, Administrator Ven watched them through the room's monitoring system, concerned. "Professor, humans seem to enter this sleep state very deeply. How will they respond to emergency signals?" Professor X waved his upper limbs in what he had learned was a human gesture meaning "don't worry." "They are highly adaptable creatures. I'm sure they will adjust to our safety requirements." Just then, a minor tremor shook the building. The alien staff immediately went into alert mode, checking systems and preparing for possible evacuation. But when they checked the monitors, they saw something astounding. Hajin and Talmin hadn't even stirred. They were sleeping peacefully, their soft snores picked up by the room's sensors. "Fascinating," Professor X murmured, making notes on his datapad. "Their ability to maintain this sleep state even during seismic activity is remarkable, though it does raise some concerns about emergency protocols." Administrator Ven's crystalline form flickered with worry. "Perhaps we should install stronger alarms in the human quarters." Professor X agreed, but he had a feeling they were about to learn some very interesting things about their new human students. As he walked back to his office, another small tremor shook the building. From the human dormitory, the only sound was peaceful snoring. This was going to be a very interesting semester indeed. 1 week after the human students arrived, Professor X called an emergency meeting. The large meeting room was filled with alien teachers and staff, all concerned about the human sleeping habits. "Our first safety drill is scheduled for tomorrow," Professor X announced, his 4 eyes focusing on different data screens at once. "Administrator Ven has prepared special alarms for the human quarters." Administrator Ven's crystal body glowed with pride as she demonstrated the new alarm system. The sound was loud enough to make several alien staff members cover their hearing organs. "This should wake even the deepest sleeper," she said confidently. The next morning, at exactly 300 hours local time, the alarms rang throughout the academy. Alien students rushed from their rooms, following evacuation protocols perfectly. Professor X stood in the gathering area, checking names off his list as students arrived. But no human students appeared. Worried, Professor X and Administrator Ven rushed to the human dormitory. They found He-Jin and Tal-Min still fast asleep in their beds. The alarm was blaring at full volume, yet both students were sleeping peacefully. Tal-Min had even pulled his blanket over his head to block out the noise. "Impossible," Administrator Ven whispered, her crystal form flickering with disbelief. "The alarm is at maximum volume." Professor X approached He-Jin's bed and gently shook him. He-Jin opened one eye, looked at the clock on the wall, and said, "5 more minutes, please." Then he rolled over and went back to sleep. The next day, the academy installed even louder alarms. They added flashing lights and even a system that made the floor vibrate. Surely this would work. The morning after that, they ran another drill. This time, Professor X watched through the monitoring system as the alarms went off. The scene was remarkable. He-Jin slept through the noise, lights, and vibrations without moving. Tal-Min actually smiled in his sleep when the floor started shaking, as if he was enjoying a massage. In the female dormitory, similar scenes played out. The human students had mastered the art of deep sleep. One student had even left a note on her door. "Please don't worry if I don't wake up for drills. Sleeping through earthquakes runs in my family." Administrator Ven was close to panic. "Professor, what if there's a real emergency? How will we evacuate them?" Professor X was studying the sleeping patterns on his datapad. "Perhaps we should ask them about their experience with natural disasters on Earth." Later that day, when all the human students were finally awake, Professor X called them to his classroom. "We need to discuss safety protocols," he began. He-Jin raised his hand. "Professor, we noticed the drills," he said politely. "On Earth, we lived in a region with many earthquakes. Our bodies learn to tell the difference between dangerous and harmless tremors, even when we're asleep." "But how?" Administrator Ven asked, her crystal form shimmering with curiosity. Tal-Min, who was trying not to doze off in his chair, opened his eyes briefly. "It's like how you know the difference between someone trying to wake you up and just walking past your room. Your brain knows what's important." Professor X found this fascinating. He made more notes on his datapad while thinking about how to adjust the safety protocols. Perhaps the humans were safer than they appeared. After all, their species had survived countless natural disasters on Earth. Still, as he watched the Jin and Tal-Min nearly fall asleep during his safety lecture, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen when a real earthquake struck Nexus 7. Little did he know, they would all find out very soon. After 2 weeks of failed safety drills, Jisoo decided it was time to help the aliens understand humans better. She was one of the few human students who actually woke up during the drills, though she usually just rolled over and went back to sleep. Professor X sat in his office, all 4 eyes focused on Jisoo as she pulled out her datapad. "Professor, I want to show you something about Earth," she said. Her voice was gentle and patient. "Please do," Professor X replied, secretly relieved that at least one human student stayed awake long enough to have a conversation. Jisoo showed him videos of natural disasters on Earth. There were massive earthquakes, giant waves called tsunamis, huge storms, and even mountains that spit fire. Professor X's outer skin changed color from blue to pale yellow in shock. "And humans sleep through these?" he asked in disbelief. "Not exactly," Jisoo explained. "We've learned to live with them. Our buildings are made to handle earthquakes. We have warning systems, but most importantly, our bodies have adapted." In another part of the academy, Administrator Ven was having a similar conversation with Suho, who had been caught taking a nap during an actual minor tremor. "But weren't you scared?" Administrator Ven asked, her crystal form flickering with concern. Suho smiled sleepily. Why should I be? The building is safe. You built it well. Besides, that shake was maybe a level 3 or 4. Wake me up when we hit 7. Administrator Ven's form flickered rapidly in confusion. Level 7. You measure earthquakes. Meanwhile, in the student lounge, Ho-Jin and Tal-Min were teaching alien students about Earth's earthquake scale. The alien students gathered around them, fascinated by their calm attitude toward natural disasters. On Earth, Ho-Jin explained while fighting back a yawn, we rate earthquakes from 1 to 10. Small ones happen all the time. Our bodies got used to them over many generations. Tal-Min, who was dozing on and off during the explanation, added, it's like how your bodies got used to the purple sun here. You don't even notice it anymore, right? The alien students looked at each other in surprise. They had never thought about it that way. One of them, a floating cloud-like being, moved closer. But how do you know when to be afraid? Jin smiled. Our bodies know. Even when we're asleep, we can tell if a shake is dangerous. It's like having a built-in alarm system. Professor X, who had been listening from the doorway, found this information fascinating. He started taking notes on his datapad. The humans weren't being careless. They were using natural instincts developed over thousands of years. That evening, during a meeting with other teachers, Professor X shared what he had learned. Perhaps, he suggested, we should study how humans sense danger instead of trying to wake them up. Administrator Ven agreed, though her crystal form still showed signs of worry. But what about our safety protocols? We can't just let them sleep through everything. Just then, another small tremor shook the building. Through the monitoring systems, they could see Ho-Jin and Tal-Min sleeping peacefully in their room. But something interesting happened. Both students automatically adjusted their sleeping positions to better brace themselves, all without waking up. Remarkable, Professor X whispered. They're responding to the tremors even in their sleep. Maybe we need to rethink what safety looks like for different species. As the day ended, the academy staff had a new understanding of their human students, but they still couldn't help wondering, what would happen when Nexus 7 had a really big earthquake? The science labs beneath the Galactic Academy were busy with activity. Alien scientists rushed from one monitoring station to another, their faces showing clear signs of worry. The seismic readings from deep under Nexus 7's surface were becoming stronger each day. Professor X stood in front of a large screen showing the planet's core activity. The patterns were unlike anything he had seen before. Next to him, Administrator Ven's crystal form pulsed with nervous energy. We should increase the number of safety drills, Administrator Ven suggested, her voice tight with concern. Professor X nodded in agreement. Yes, but what about the human students? They still sleep through every alarm. In the dormitory above, Ho-Jin and Tal-Min were proving this point perfectly. They slept soundly through the morning drill, despite the new ultra-loud alarms. The alien students had evacuated quickly, but the humans remained peaceful in their beds. Suho, however, had found a creative way to use the drill times. When the alarms went off, he would find a quiet corner in the evacuation shelter and take a quick nap. The alien students watched in amazement as he could fall asleep anywhere, even while standing. How do you do that? A tentacled alien student asked him. Suho opened one eye and smiled. It's a skill we learn in school back home. We call it the 5-minute power nap. Meanwhile, the planet's activity continued to increase. Small tremors became more frequent. The alien students jumped at every shake, but the humans remained remarkably calm. Jisoo even started keeping a tremor journal, rating each one on the Earth scale she had learned back home. This one was about a 3.5, she said during lunch, making notes while the cafeteria lights swayed slightly. Back home, we wouldn't even pause our video games for this. Professor X overheard her comment and added it to his growing research on human behavior. He had noticed that while the humans seemed careless about the tremors, they actually paid very close attention to them. They just had a different way of showing it. One evening, as Hejin was falling asleep in the library while studying, he felt something unusual. The tremor was different from the others. It had a strange pattern he had never felt before. He opened his eyes briefly, made a mental note, then went back to sleep. The next morning, he mentioned it to Professor X. "The shake last night felt weird," he said, trying to hide a yawn. "It reminded me of the tremors we felt before the big earthquake in my hometown." Professor X's 4 eyes widened. He quickly checked the seismic data from the night before. The patterns matched perfectly with signs of an approaching major earthquake. The human's natural instincts had detected something his advanced equipment had almost missed. Perhaps, Professor X thought to himself, we have been too focused on trying to change the human's behavior instead of learning from it. Administrator Van called for more drills, but now she watched the human students with new interest. She noticed how they would shift positions in their sleep when tremors hit, automatically moving to safer positions without waking up. As the week progressed, the warning signs became clearer. The alien staff prepared for what their instruments told them would be a massive earthquake. But the human students continued their normal routines, studying, sleeping, and occasionally paying attention in class. Little did anyone know, the biggest test of human adaptability was about to begin. The week of final exams arrived at the Galactic Academy of Sciences. The hallways were quiet as students prepared for their tests. Even the usual tremors seemed to have paused, creating an unusual silence across the campus. Professor X sat in his office, reviewing test papers. His monitoring screens showed deep seismic activity, but the surface remained calm. Too calm. Administrator Ven had visited 3 times that morning, her crystal form flickering with nervous energy. In the library, most human students were asleep among their books and data pads. Hejin and Tal Min had claimed their favorite study corner, which meant they had found the perfect spot for a nap. Suho was dozing in an anti-gravity chair, while Jisoo had fallen asleep over her physics notes. The first sign came at exactly 2:47 p.m. local time. A low rumble emerged from deep within the planet. The alien students looked up from their studies, their various appendages trembling. But the human students slept on, peaceful and undisturbed. Then it hit. The biggest earthquake in Nexus 7's recorded history struck the planet. The ground moved like ocean waves. Buildings swayed, windows rattled, and the purple sky outside seemed to vibrate. The Academy's advanced safety systems activated immediately, creating protective force fields around the structure. Alien students rushed to evacuation points, following their drill training perfectly. Professor X and Administrator Ven coordinated the emergency response, their voices steady despite their fear. The earthquake continued to grow stronger. In the library, Hejin briefly opened one eye as his desk swayed. "Just 5 more minutes," he mumbled, adjusting his position slightly before falling back asleep. Next to him, Tal Min smiled in his sleep, as if enjoying a gentle rocking motion. Suho actually snored louder as the anti-gravity chair swayed back and forth. Jisoo turned a page in her sleep, her body automatically shifting to maintain balance as the building moved. Through the emergency monitoring systems, Professor X watched in amazement. While panic spread among the alien population, the human students remained completely relaxed. Their bodies naturally moved with each tremor, maintaining perfect balance even in deep sleep. The earthquake lasted for 7 minutes and 23 seconds. It registered as the most powerful seismic event in the planet's history. When it finally ended, the Academy's structure had held perfectly, protected by its advanced technology. Administrator Ven rushed to check on the human students, expecting to find them shaken and afraid. Instead, she found them still sleeping peacefully. Hejin had wrapped his jacket around himself like a blanket. Tal Min had shifted his position only slightly, finding an even more comfortable spot. "Impossible," she whispered, her crystal form pulsing with disbelief. Professor X joined her in the library, all 4 of his eyes wide with wonder. "No," he said quietly, "not impossible. Natural. They evolved on a planet with constant geological activity. This is their normal." As if to prove his point, Ho-Jin chose that moment to wake up naturally. He stretched, looked at his watch, and then noticed all the aliens staring at him. "Did something happen?" he asked, trying to hide a yawn. "I thought I felt a little shake during my nap." The aliens could only stare in response. Outside, emergency vehicles flew past the windows. Warning signals flashed across the city. And in the library of the Galactic Academy of Sciences, the human students began to wake up one by one, completely unaware that they had just slept through the biggest earthquake in the planet's history. The day after the Great Earthquake, the Galactic Academy's science team gathered in the main conference room. They had spent hours reviewing security footage from the event. What they discovered amazed them. Professor X stood before a large screen showing recordings from the library. The footage clearly showed Ho-Jin and Tal-Min sleeping through the earthquake. However, something remarkable happened each time a strong tremor hit. "Watch carefully," Professor X said, pointing with his upper limbs. "See how their bodies automatically adjust to maintain balance." Administrator Ven's crystal form glowed with interest as she watched. The footage showed Ho-Jin's body moving naturally with each shake, like a tree bending in the wind. Tal-Min had unconsciously braced himself against his desk, all while remaining deeply asleep. Their bodies knew exactly what to do, Professor X explained. Years of living with earthquakes on Earth taught them these responses. In another part of the academy, Ji-Soo was explaining to a group of amazed alien students how she had learned to sleep through earthquakes. "In my hometown," she said, "we had small tremors almost every week. After a while, your body learns which ones matter and which ones don't." Suho added his own experience. "It's like how you don't wake up when someone walks past your room, but you wake up instantly if someone calls your name. Our bodies know the difference between dangerous and safe movements." The Academy's medical team had also made interesting discoveries. They had monitored the human students' vital signs during the earthquake. The data showed that their heart rates had remained perfectly normal throughout the event. Even their stress levels stayed low, the chief medical officer reported, waving her tentacles in excitement. Their bodies handled the situation without needing to wake their conscious minds. Professor X gathered all this information for a special report. He discovered that each human student had displayed unique, but equally effective responses to the earthquake. Some had adjusted their positions. Others had gripped nearby objects. A few had even moved to safer spots, all while remaining asleep. Meanwhile, Ho-Jin and Tal-Min had become unexpected celebrities. News of their peaceful sleep during the planet's biggest earthquake spread quickly. Alien reporters gathered outside the academy, hoping to interview the humans who could sleep through anything. "I don't understand why everyone is so excited," Ho-Jin said, trying to hide another yawn. "We didn't do anything special." Tal-Min nodded in agreement. "We just took a nap, like any other day." Administrator Ven found their response fascinating. Her research team had been analyzing Earth's geological history. They discovered that humans had lived with earthquakes for thousands of years. Over time, their bodies had developed natural ways to handle them. "Perhaps," she said during a staff meeting, "we should learn from the humans instead of trying to change them." Professor X agreed. He had already started writing a new paper about human adaptation abilities. The title was "Sleep Through Danger: How Humans Turn Natural Disasters into Nap Time." As the academy returned to normal, one thing had changed forever. The alien staff and students now looked at their human classmates with new respect. Anyone who could sleep peacefully through the biggest earthquake in planetary history clearly had something to teach them about adaptation and survival. 2 weeks after the Great Earthquake, Professor X presented his research findings to the Galactic Science Council. The grand meeting hall was filled with scientists from different planets, all eager to learn about human adaptation abilities. Professor X stood at the center of the room, his data screens floating around him. Today, we present our study on human resilience during seismic events, he began. What we discovered has changed our understanding of species adaptation. The first screen showed recordings of Jin and Talmin sleeping through various tremors. The alien scientists leaned forward in their seats, amazed by what they saw. The humans' bodies moved naturally with each shake, like dancers following music they couldn't hear. These movements are not random, Professor X explained. The human brain processes danger signals even during deep sleep. Their bodies know exactly how to respond without waking up. Administrator Ven then presented her part of the research. Her crystal form glowed brightly as she shared the medical data. Human vital signs remain stable during all seismic events, she reported. Their stress levels actually decreased during stronger tremors, as if the rocking motion helped them sleep better. In the audience, Jisoo sat with the other human students. She had helped the research team understand Earth's long history with earthquakes. The alien scientists were particularly interested in her explanation of how humans had adapted to living in unstable regions. Think of it like learning to walk, Jisoo had told them. At first, every baby falls down. But over time, staying balanced becomes natural. It's the same with earthquakes. Our bodies learned over many generations. The research team had conducted several experiments. They created artificial tremors of different strengths and patterns. The results showed that human students could tell the difference between dangerous and harmless shakes, even while completely asleep. Suho had participated in many of these tests, though mostly he just enjoyed the extra nap time. It's like having a built-in safety system, he explained to the curious scientists. Your body knows when to wake up and when to keep sleeping. The most surprising discovery came from studying the humans' brain patterns during seismic events. The data showed that their brains processed earthquake information through the same pathways used for rocking babies to sleep. In other words, Professor X concluded, what we consider a natural disaster, human bodies might interpret as a comfortable rocking motion. This adaptation allows them to maintain essential rest even during dangerous situations. The Galactic Science Council was both impressed and slightly worried by these findings. One council member, a floating gas cloud, asked the question everyone was thinking. Does this mean humans can sleep through any disaster? Jin, who had been fighting to stay awake during a presentation, answered without thinking. Only if it's not worth waking up for, he said, then immediately fell asleep in his chair. The council chamber filled with amazed whispers. Professor X quickly added this unexpected demonstration to his research notes. It seemed that with each passing day, the humans revealed new aspects of their remarkable adaptation abilities. As the presentation ended, the council agreed to fund further studies of human resilience. They particularly wanted to understand how humans could teach their bodies to turn danger into comfort. It seemed that the species they had once worried about protecting had much to teach them about survival. 1 month after the Great Earthquake, the Galactic Academy of Sciences looked very different. The most noticeable change was the removal of the ultra-loud alarm systems. In their place, the Academy had installed new safety measures based on human design principles. Professor X stood in his classroom, explaining the new approach to a mixed group of human and alien students. We have learned that safety does not always mean being alert, he said, his 4 eyes showing excitement. Sometimes, it means trusting your body's natural responses. The Academy had completely changed its earthquake safety protocols. Instead of fighting against human sleeping habits, they now encouraged all students to develop natural adaptation skills. Jin and Talmin had become unofficial teachers, showing alien students how to recognize different types of tremors. The key is to listen to your body, Jin explained to a group of floating cloud-like students. He tried not to yawn while speaking, but failed. Your body is smarter than you think. It knows what's dangerous and what isn't. Administrator Ven had transformed her crystal form into various colors to show her excitement about the new system. Her research team had discovered that many alien species could develop similar adaptive abilities with proper training. We were so focused on staying alert, she told the Academy Board, that we forgot about the power of natural adaptation. The humans showed us a better way. Ji-Soo and Suho had started teaching popular classes about Earth's approach to natural disasters. Their seminar series, Sleep Through Anything, Lessons from Earth, had a long waiting list of alien students eager to learn. Back home, we have a saying, Suho told his class, fighting to keep his eyes open. The best survival skill is knowing when not to worry. Then he fell asleep at his desk, providing a perfect demonstration of his point. The Academy's new safety measures spread to other institutions across Nexus 7. Buildings were redesigned to move with earthquakes instead of fighting against them. Shelter areas were made more comfortable, with spaces for resting during long events. Even the Galactic Science Council had changed its view on human students. What they once saw as a weakness, the ability to sleep through anything, they now recognized as an incredible strength. They started sending scientists to Earth to study how humans had adapted to various natural disasters. Hajin and Talmin's fame had grown beyond the Academy. They received invitations to speak at other schools, though they often fell asleep during their own presentations. Somehow, this only made their message more powerful. The humans have taught us something invaluable, Professor X said during the end-of-term ceremony. True resilience isn't about constant vigilance. It's about working with nature, not against it. As he spoke these words, a medium-sized tremor shook the building. The alien students, following their new training, remained calm. Some even smiled as they felt their bodies naturally adjust to the movement, just as they had learned from their human classmates. In the back of the hall, Hujin and Talmin slept peacefully through the ceremony, their bodies gently swaying with each tremor. Next to them, several alien students had managed to doze off as well, finally understanding that sometimes the best response to danger was a good nap. The Galactic Academy had changed forever, and with it, the way the galaxy thought about human adaptation. As Professor X liked to say, the humans didn't just survive our biggest earthquake. They slept through it and taught us all how to do the same.